Hi everyone, this is James from Titan Drones. Today we're going to be modifying the Phantom 4 Pro Plus for use with our various antenna systems and ground stations. Alright, before we begin, as always, we like to employ anti-static measures. So we have an anti-static mat, anti-static wristband. Alright, step number one is we're going to remove the rubber bumpers. This is just held on with double-sided tape. We do provide you with double-sided tape pre-cut to replace these at the end. That's basically concealing those two screw holes, and you remove these two on the bottom so you can get to the other two screws. Now you're going to take your number 1 Phillips and remove the 4 screws around the perimeter. Take your T6 torque screwdriver and you're going to remove the 4 screws that hold down the I/O plate cover. Alright, now you're going to pry up the cover. And set that aside. Alright, first step is we are going to remove this little connector right there. That's what powers the fan. Just going to gently unplug that. It's a little 2-pin connector. Now you're going to take your number 0 Phillips head. You're going to remove the 4 screws around the perimeter of the heatsink. Be careful that you do not bind or touch those cables when you unscrew this screw. Alright, as you remove this heat sink, there's going to be some thermal paste on the bottom. Just be careful not to get that everywhere. Set that aside. Now you're going to want to remove this little connector here, this ribbon cable. Pry up, just like you do on most DJI connectors, and then gently you're going to pull it out. And then this is typical ribbon cable you're used to seeing with DJI products. Pry the retainer clip up, take your nylon tool and gently pull it out. Side to side seems to work best. And then remove the I/O board. There is 3 connectors on the back you need to remove, so don't pull too hard when you're separating this board from the casing. Just pry these off. All right, now's a good time to note the location of these cables and connectors, where they come out of the shell, because you're going to have to get them back in the same location when you go to reassemble. So take a picture of it with your phone if you need to, but you want them to come out the same spots when you go to reassemble the controller shell. All right, before we take the shell apart, I like to take this connector here and push it down inside the controller. And the reason for this is we're just trying to protect it, because when we separate the controller, that's a fairly delicate cable and we don't want to cause any damage to it. So now that you've done that, now you're ready to separate the controller, and what you're going to do is you're going to separate it along the parting line. So grab onto the metal base there, and then gently pull apart. Take your thumb and apply some pressure right there on the top. That'll help separate the shell. Right in the middle where that DJI logo is. Alright, now unhook your battery cable at the bottom. Alright, now your shell is apart. Alright, first step is to remove your two scroll wheel assemblies. This is done with a number 0 Phillips. Next, you can pry out your two MMCX connections. Now we're going to fish the cables out. Now you can take your needle nose plier and apply some pressure to the retainer tabs so you can take out the factory antenna. Now we always prefer this method because you can keep your factory antennas intact. If that's not your goal, feel free to snip the cables and discard these antennas. But if we do your modification, we always send those back with the controller. All right, the next step is to assemble your cable assemblies from our mod kit. And to do that, you just take your cables and remove the nut and the lock washer. You can discard the lock washer, you won't need that. You take your QMA adapters, and what these do is these encapsulate the head of the QMA cable. So the QMA cable sandwiches between the two halves. This is what allows for a nice clean install. It's a much better method than if you had like a 90-degree cable, which some use. Those cables tend to fail more over time. That's what you're looking for there. Notice one of them is has a key on it, and one of them has a groove. You can just hand tighten the nuts because we're going to be taking those off again once we put the bracket on, but you just want them to hold together right now so you can feed them through. You're going to take your cable assemblies and you're going to feed it through the factory antenna hole. And we tooled these to fit nice and snug. Just apply a little bit of pressure and then make sure you're holding the back so you don't crack anything. And that's what you're looking for there. All right, now you're gonna route your new cables, and we like to go the same way as factory when we do ours. Now the cables we provide you are slightly thicker than the factory cables, so just take your time, but as you can see it's not that difficult to do. The cabling we provide is actually lower loss cabling than the factory as well. This cable here is giving you trouble. You may need to loosen up this joystick assembly here. And that's going to give you a little more room to fish your cable. To do that, just take your number 0 Phillips head and you're going to loosen up these screws. Now to get to this fourth screw under here, you're going to have to remove this ribbon cable. So pry up on the retainer clip, pry out the ribbon cable gently. Now you can get to that screw. Again, you may not have to do this, but if you do, now you know how to do it. You can see by loosening up that joystick assembly, now we're able to get the head of the cable underneath there. Now you can take your needle nose pliers and help you fish it the rest of the way. All right, now we got them both fished through. All right, now go ahead and re-secure the 4 screws for the joystick housing. Now you can connect your MMCX connections onto the board. Just make sure they're snug. Now you can reinstall your scroll wheel assemblies. Alright, now remember, if you undid this ribbon cable to get to that screw, and make sure to reinstall that. Just push it in gently, and then push down on the retaining clip. Alright, now we are going to hook the battery connector back up so we can get prepared to put the shell back together. Alright, now this is where in the beginning you wanted to pay attention to where all the cables and connectors came through, because you want to have everything come through the back of the shell the same way. All right, once you fish them through, now you can push the 2 halves back together. You're going to do that around the parting line on the perimeter, and then just make sure you don't have any cables that are pinching. And always on the top, you can depress right in the middle, and that'll help snap it in nice and tight. Same thing on the bottom, right in the middle. Alright, now it's time to replace your I/O board. So you're going to reconnect all of your connections on the back. Place your ribbon cable. Push down on your retaining clip. And reinstall this side ribbon cable. Alright, now that it's seated back in place, you can take your heatsink and fan assembly, place it back where it came from. You can wiggle it a little bit just to make sure the thermal paste makes contact. Now you can secure the screws around the perimeter with your number 0 Phillips head. And again, on this one, be careful with those wires right there. Get them out of your way. Now you can reinstall this little 2-pin connector. Now we're going to replace the I/O cover on the back. Just push it down in place and then secure it with your T6 Torx screws. Now replace the 4 screws around the perimeter. You're going to do this with your number 1 Phillips head. Now you can replace the rubber caps. There's 2 on the bottom. And now we can replace the rubber bumpers. In order to do this, make sure to peel off the factory tape that came with it. I guess some people that say that theirs did not stick well, and it's probably because you left the factory tape on and or it was dirty. We pre-cut these for you. Push it in nice and firm. Then you can peel off the paper backing. Now when you do this, go nice and slow. You may have to roll it back and forth just to make sure the tape doesn't come up with the paper. And that's what you're looking for. And then reapply. And the same thing on the other side. Now we're going to install the T-lock bracket. Just remove the nuts on your QMA your QMA connections. And you open the bracket that we provide with your kit. Just slides over and then you secure it with the two nuts again. Alright, now that you've modified your controller to have our T-lock on it and our cabling, this is going to allow you to interface with a number of our products, including our ground stations, our whip antennas, our control antenna system, our cyclone antenna system. So you pretty much have all your bases covered. Now the last step would be to hook up some antennas, whatever antenna system you have, and then test your RC for functionality, make sure all your buttons are working. And you are all set after that. So once again, this is James from Titan Drones, and this is the Phantom 4 Plus remote controller modification video.